The emergency sirens pierced through the sterile air of the Galactic Council's most secure facility. Deep within the archives of Station Nexus 7, two figures moved through corridors that hadn't seen visitors in over 3 centuries. Their footsteps echoed against walls lined with quantum storage units, each one containing the collective knowledge of 1,000 civilizations. Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the scanner, her heart pounding as the ancient lock disengaged with a soft hiss. Beside her, Commander Jake Morrison gripped his plasma rifle, eyes scanning the shadows that danced in the pale blue light of the archive chambers. "Are you sure about this, Sarah?" Jake whispered, his voice barely audible above the distant wail of alarms. "Once we access those files, there's no going back." Sarah's dark eyes reflected the glow of the quantum displays around them. She had spent 15 years as the Council's chief xenobiologist, studying alien life forms across the galaxy. But nothing had prepared her for what she'd discovered 3 days ago in the restricted databases. The Council has been lying to everyone, Jake, about Earth, about humans, about everything we thought we knew about our place in the galaxy. Her fingers trembled as she input the final access codes. "They've classified Earth as a Class 13 Deathworld for the past 400 years. Do you know what that means?" Jake's military training had taught him about the galactic classification system. Classy worlds were paradise planets, garden worlds where life flourished in perfect harmony. Each ascending class meant increasing danger and hostility to life. But Class 13? That's impossible, Jake breathed. Class 13 worlds are theoretical. Places so dangerous that even the most advanced species can't survive there for more than a few hours. The massive quantum archive hummed to life around them. Holographic displays materializing in the air like ghostly windows into forbidden knowledge. Sarah's hands moved across the interfaces with practiced precision, calling up files that bore the highest security classifications in Council history. "That's what I thought too," Sarah said, her voice growing stronger with each revelation. "Until I found this." The first hologram showed Earth as seen from space, that familiar blue marble suspended against the infinite black. But the data streams, flowing beside it, told a different story. Atmospheric composition readings that made seasoned xenobiologists gasp in horror. Gravity measurements that should have crushed most known species flat. Weather patterns that included phenomena the Council had classified as extinction-level events. "Look at this," Sarah pointed to a scrolling cascade of numbers. "Our atmospheric oxygen content is 21%. The average for habitable worlds in Council space is 8%. Most species would suffer oxygen poisoning just from breathing our air." Jake stared at the display, understanding beginning to dawn in his eyes. "And our gravity? 1 full G. Most Council species evolved in 0.3 to 0.6 G environments. Our gravity would cripple them within hours." Sarah's voice carried a mixture of amazement and growing anger. "But it gets worse, much worse." She called up another display, this one showing Earth's weather systems. Hurricanes that spanned continents, tornadoes with wind speeds that could level cities, lightning storms that unleashed the power of fusion bombs with each strike. The Council's environmental assessment team classified our thunderstorms as localized atmospheric warfare. They couldn't understand how any life form could evolve on a planet where the sky itself wages war every single day. Jake's military mind began processing the implications. "The wildlife assessments?" Sarah's expression grew grim. "This is where it gets truly insane." New holographic displays materialized, showing Earth's predatory species. Lions, tigers, bears, sharks. Creatures that most galactic species would classify as nightmare monsters from their darkest myths. A single Earth bear has the bite force to crush the exoskeleton of a Zephyrian battle drone. Our house cats are classified as apex micro-predators capable of decimating entire ecosystems on garden worlds. And humans. She paused, calling up the most classified file of all. The hologram showed a human anatomical scan, but the annotations around it were written in the formal script used for documenting cosmic-level threats. According to the Council's Xenobiology Department, humans are the most successful predatory species ever documented. We have forward-facing eyes like apex hunters. We can track prey across vast distances using persistence hunting, something no other known species does. We have omnivorous teeth designed for tearing both plant and animal matter, and our endurance. The display showed comparison charts that made Jake's breath catch in his throat. Human endurance levels exceeded those of most council species by factors of 10 or more. Where other species needed rest cycles every few hours, humans could maintain activity for 16 to 20 hours at a time. They documented our wars, Jake. Every conflict from ancient times to the modern era. The Council's military analysts concluded that humans are the only species in known galactic history to develop warfare as an art form. We don't just fight to survive, we fight for sport, for ideology, for resources we don't even need. The archive chamber fell silent except for the humming of quantum processors. Jake stared at the displays surrounding them, pieces of a massive puzzle clicking into place in his mind. This is why they quarantined our solar system, he said slowly. This is why first contact took so long. They weren't protecting us from the galaxy, they were protecting the galaxy from us. Sarah nodded grimly. And there's more. The Council's long-term strategic assessment projects that if humans ever gained access to galactic technology and joined the broader community, we would become the dominant military power within 50 years. Not because we're more advanced, but because we're from a world that breeds warriors by default. Suddenly, the archive's security systems erupted in a cascade of red warning lights. Automated voices echoed through the chamber in a dozen alien languages, all delivering the same message. Unauthorized access detected. Security forces responding. Surrender immediately. Jake raised his rifle as the sound of approaching footsteps echoed from multiple corridors. How long do we need? Sarah's fingers flew across the quantum interfaces, downloading terabytes of classified data to encrypted storage cores. 2 more minutes. I'm copying everything. The real first contact protocols, the Council's contingency plans for human integration, the classified reports on Earth's strategic value. Sarah, some of these files are labeled Council Eyes Only, Extinction Protocols, Jake said, his voice tight with tension. What are extinction protocols? Sarah's face went pale as she opened the file. The holographic display showed strategic plans that chilled her to the bone. Detailed scenarios for containing or eliminating threats from Class 1 Deathworlds, plans that included orbital bombardment, biological warfare, and something called stellar containment. They have contingency plans for destroying Earth, she whispered. If humans ever become too dangerous, if we ever develop faster than light travel independently, they have protocols for sterilizing our entire solar system. The sound of plasma fire erupted from the corridor behind them. Jake spun around, his rifle charging with a high-pitched whine. Time's up, Sarah. Whatever you're downloading, it needs to happen now. Almost finished, Sarah shouted over the growing chaos. Jake, we're not just discovering the truth about Earth. We're uncovering the biggest conspiracy in galactic history. The Council has been manipulating species development for thousands of years, preventing any world from becoming too powerful, too independent. The final download completed just as the first Council security forces rounded the corner. Jake opened fire, his human reflexes and accuracy shocking the alien soldiers who had never faced a predator species in combat. While they fumbled with their weapons designed for conflicts between peaceful species, Jake moved with the fluid precision of a hunter evolved on a world where hesitation meant death. The maintenance tunnels, Sarah shouted, clutching the encrypted storage cores to her chest. I know another way out. As they raced through the twisting passages beneath Station Nexus 7, Sarah's mind reeled with the implications of what they'd discovered. Humanity wasn't just another species seeking its place among the stars. They were living weapons forged in the crucible of the most dangerous world in known space. And now the galaxy was about to learn what happened when you tried to cage Earth's children. The emergency bulkheads began sealing behind them as they reached the docking bay where their ship waited. But even as they prepared to escape with evidence that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far more dangerous than they'd imagined. The Council had kept humanity isolated for 4 centuries. What else had they been hiding, and more importantly, what would they do to keep their secrets buried? 3 hours after their escape from Station Nexus 7, Sarah and Jake's ship, the Persistence, hung in the shadow of a dead moon, its stealth systems pushed to their limits. The ship's name had been chosen carelessly years ago, but now it seemed prophetic. Human persistence was exactly what they would need to survive what was coming. In the cramped quarters of their modified cargo hauler, Sarah hunched over quantum decryption arrays, her eyes burning from staring at streams of classified data. Jake monitored their sensor arrays, watching for the Council enforcement fleet that would surely follow. "Sarah, you need to see this," Jake called from the pilot station. "We're not the only ones running." She looked up from her work to see the tactical display showing dozens of blips scattered across local space. Ships of various configurations, all moving away from Council territory at maximum speed. "What am I looking at?" "Emergency broadcast from across the sector. Word is already spreading about our little archive raid, and it's causing panic." Jake's fingers danced over the communications array, pulling in transmissions from fleeing vessels. "Listen to this." The ship's speakers crackled to life with alien voices speaking in Universal Translator Standard. Confirmed reports that humans have accessed classification Omega files, evacuating all personnel from frontier sectors immediately. Recommend activating Containment Protocol 7 until the situation is resolved. Sarah felt her blood chill. Containment Protocol 7? Jake's military experience with Council operations kicked in. Lockdown procedures for extreme threats. No ships in or out of designated zones. Shoot to kill orders for anything that moves. He turned to face her, his expression grim. "Sarah, they're not just hunting us. They're treating this like a full-scale invasion." "Because that's exactly what it is," Sarah said, returning to her decryption work with renewed urgency. "Jake, the files I'm finding here. The Council isn't just a peaceful alliance of civilized species. They're a control mechanism. They've been actively suppressing technological and cultural development across the galaxy for over 10,000 years. New holographic displays materialized between them, showing galactic maps marked with symbols that told a chilling story. Hundreds of systems marked with red warning beacons. Species that had vanished from historical records. Entire civilizations that had simply stopped. "Look at this pattern," Sarah said, highlighting clusters of dead systems. "Every 2,000 to 3,000 years there's a wave of disappearances. Always species that were showing rapid technological advancement or military expansion." Jake studied the patterns with a strategist's eye. "They're culling the herd, preventing anyone from getting strong enough to challenge Council authority." Exactly. And according to these projections, humanity was scheduled for containment evaluation within the next 50 years. Our technological development has been accelerating too fast. We've gone from basic spaceflight to interstellar travel in just 3 centuries. Most species take millennia to make that transition. A proximity alarm chimed softly. Jake's attention snapped back to the sensor arrays. "We've got company. Council pursuit ships closing fast." Through the viewport, Sarah could see the sleek forms of 3 Council enforcement vessels dropping out of hyperspace. Their smooth, organic-looking hulls gleamed with the blue-white energy signatures of advanced weapon systems. Each ship was easily 3 times the size of the Persistence. "They're broadcasting surrender demands," Jake reported. "Standard Council enforcement protocols. Submit to boarding. Prepare for extradition to face charges of treason against Galactic peace." Sarah laughed bitterly. "Galactic peace? Is that what they call systematic genocide and cultural suppression?" "Doesn't matter what they call it," Jake said, his hands moving to the ship's weapon controls. "We've got about 30 seconds before they open fire. Our little cargo hauler isn't going to outrun Council interceptors." "Then we don't run," Sarah said, surprising him with the steel in her voice. "Jake, I need you to trust me on this. Everything we've learned about human evolution, about our capabilities compared to other species, it applies to more than just physical traits." She began pulling up tactical analysis files from the archive, her fingers flying over the controls with desperate precision. Council military doctrine is based on conflicts between civilized species. Their entire strategic framework assumes opponents who follow the same basic rules of engagement they do. Jake began to understand. But humans don't follow those rules. We can't. We evolved on a world where following civilized rules of engagement got you killed. Sarah's eyes blazed with the fire of revelation. Jake, every human military strategist, from Sun Tzu to modern tactical doctrine, has been preparing us for exactly this kind of fight. Asymmetric warfare against technologically superior opponents. The Council vessels were closing to weapons range. Jake could see their targeting systems painting the Persistence with tracking beams. In the communication channels, alien voices were counting down to weapons authorization. "What do you need me to do?" Jake asked. Sarah's fingers completed their work on the tactical systems. "Remember the Millennium Falcon?" Despite everything, Jake grinned. Human popular culture had always celebrated the idea of small, fast ships outwitting larger, more powerful opponents. "Never tell me the odds." "The odds are actually in our favor," Sarah said, bringing up displays that showed Council tactical doctrine. Their weapons are designed for ship-to-ship combat between vessels following standard engagement protocols, but we're not going to engage them as a ship. She activated systems that Jake hadn't even known their cargo hauler possessed. Suddenly, the Persistence wasn't registering as a single vessel on the Council sensors. Instead, it appeared as dozens of smaller objects, each moving in seemingly random patterns. "Chaff and electronic countermeasures," Sarah explained. "Combined with human unpredictability algorithms. The Council's targeting computers are trying to predict our movements based on standard evasion patterns, but I've programmed our flight path using data from Earth predators, specifically the hunting patterns of Persistence predators." Jake felt the ship begin to move in ways that defied conventional spaceflight doctrine. Instead of smooth, efficient curves, they were moving in sudden bursts and unexpected directions. The Council ship's targeting systems couldn't lock onto them. "Their weapons are more powerful than ours," Sarah continued, "but they're designed for precision strikes against predictable targets. We're going to hunt them using Earth tactics, make them exhaust their resources chasing shadows while we strike, when they're not expecting it." One of the Council ships fired, sending a stream of plasma that would have vaporized the Persistence if it had been where their computers predicted. Instead, the shots passed harmlessly through empty space while Jake brought their ship around in a maneuver that should have been impossible for a vessel of their size. "Now!" Sarah shouted. Jake triggered their weapons, not the ship's main guns, but a modification Sarah had made using data from the archive files. Instead of trying to match the Council ship's firepower, they targeted the aliens' greatest weakness: their dependence on technology over instinct. Electromagnetic pulse charges erupted around the lead Council vessel, not enough to destroy it but sufficient to disrupt its sophisticated computer systems. For crucial seconds, the ship was flying blind, its crew struggling to switch to manual controls they rarely used. That was all the opening Jake needed. The Persistence struck like a hunting cat, targeting the disabled ship's weakest points, with surgical precision. Not to destroy. They needed information more than victories, but to cripple. The Council ship listed helplessly as its navigation systems failed. The other two vessels moved to assist, but Sarah was already plotting their next move. "They're calling for reinforcements," Jake reported. "At least a dozen more ships inbound." "Then we need to move fast," Sarah said. "Jake, I found something in these files that changes everything. The Council isn't just suppressing other species, they're afraid of something. Something that drove them to create this entire system of control in the first place." As the Persistence accelerated away from the disabled Council ships, Sarah pulled up the most classified files in the archive, ancient records that predated the Council itself, speaking of a threat that had once swept across the galaxy. "The predecessor war," she whispered. "Jake, there was another species like humans, maybe even more dangerous. They called them the Harbingers, and they nearly destroyed galactic civilization before the Council found a way to stop them." Jake's blood ran cold. "What happened to them?" Sarah's voice was barely audible above the ship's engines. "According to these records, they didn't just disappear. They were contained, locked away somewhere beyond the galactic rim, and the Council has been preparing for their return ever since." The implications hit both of them at the same time. The Council's entire system of oppression, their careful management of species development, their terror at humanity's rapid advancement, it was all preparation for a war that might already be coming. And now, by exposing the truth about human capabilities, Sarah and Jake might have just accelerated the very conflict the Council had been trying to prevent. In the distance, more Council ships were dropping out of hyperspace. But for the first time since their escape began, Sarah wasn't thinking about running. She was thinking about what would happen when two apex predator species finally met among the stars. Chapter 3. The Deeper Truth. The abandoned mining station hung in the asteroid field like a metal skeleton, its hull pocked with micrometeorite impacts and radiation scoring. It had been dead for over a century, making it the perfect place for Sarah and Jake to hide while they processed the most dangerous information in galactic history. Deep in the station's shielded core, surrounded by jury-rigged quantum processors and holographic displays, Sarah worked with the desperate intensity of someone racing against time itself. Jake stood guard at the main entrance, but his attention kept drifting to the impossible revelations materializing in the air around them. "Jake, you need to see this," Sarah called, her voice tight with a mixture of excitement and terror. "I've broken through the final encryption layers on the predecessor files." The holographic display that materialized between them showed a star, map unlike anything either had ever seen. Instead of the familiar spiral arm patterns of their home galaxy, this map showed vast empty spaces marked with symbols that pulsed like wounds in the fabric of space itself. "The Harbingers weren't from this galaxy," Sarah explained, her fingers dancing across quantum interfaces as she pulled up file after classified file. "They came from somewhere else, somewhere far beyond the galactic rim, from a region the Council's xenoarchaeologists called the Dark Cluster." Jake studied the alien symbols marking dead space. "What were they?" "A species that evolved on a world that makes Earth look like a garden paradise." Sarah's voice carried a mixture of awe and horror. "Look at their homeworld assessment." The display showed a planet that defied conventional understanding of what could sustain life. The surface temperature fluctuated between absolute zero and molten metal. The atmosphere was a toxic mix of industrial chemicals and radioactive compounds. Gravitational anomalies caused by the planet's proximity to a binary pulsar system created tidal forces that regularly tore the landscape apart and reformed it. "How could anything evolve in conditions like that?" Jake breathed. "That's exactly what the Council's xenobiologists asked. The answer is what terrified them." Sarah pulled up biological assessments that made the classifications of human capabilities look tame by comparison. The Harbingers didn't just survive in those conditions, they thrived. They developed technology by harnessing the very forces that should have destroyed them. They used gravitational distortions as tools. They built their cities inside active volcanoes and powered their civilization with controlled nuclear reactions. Jake felt his worldview shifting as he processed the implications. They were natural weapons engineers. More than that, they were natural conquerors. But unlike humans, who developed warfare as a response to competition with our own species, the Harbingers developed it as a response to their entire universe trying to kill them every single day. Sarah's hands trembled as she accessed deeper files. "Jake, they didn't just wage war. They fought reality itself and won." The holographic displays around them began showing tactical assessments from the predecessor war. Battle reports that read like descriptions of natural disasters. Entire star systems converted into weapons. Planets moved from their orbits and used as kinetic projectiles. Artificial black holes deployed as siege engines. The war lasted for over 3,000 years, Sarah continued. The Harbingers swept across 60% of the galaxy before the Council species finally found a way to stop them. But they didn't defeat them through superior technology or strategy. How then? Sarah's expression grew grim. They made a deal. The final classified files opened before them like the pages of a cosmic horror story. Secret negotiations between the Council's predecessor civilizations and the Harbinger leadership. Agreements that chilled Jake's blood as he read them. The Council offered them something they wanted more than conquest, Sarah explained. A challenge. worthy of their capabilities. Instead of destroying them, the Council convinced the Harbingers to enter voluntary containment in the Dark Cluster. They were given access to technologies and resources that would let them build whatever they wanted, as long as they stayed beyond the galactic rim. Jake stared at the ancient treaty documents. They bought peace by giving the ultimate weapon species an unlimited research budget? Exactly. And according to these monitoring reports, the Harbingers have been busy. For 10,000 years, they've been building something in the Dark Cluster. Something that makes their original invasion force look like children playing with toys. Suddenly, the implications of everything they'd discovered crashed together in Jake's mind like colliding stars. Sarah, the Council's suppression of other species, their terror at human development. They're not just trying to maintain control. They're trying to prevent anyone from becoming strong enough to attract Harbinger attention. Sarah finished. The treaty includes clauses about galactic development thresholds. If any species reaches certain technological or military benchmarks, it triggers Harbinger monitoring protocols. Jake felt the blood drain from his face. And humans just crossed those thresholds. Worse than that. According to these files, human development patterns match Harbinger psychological profiles with 87% accuracy. Both species evolved as persistence predators on extreme Deathworlds. Both developed technology through conflict with hostile environments. Both show rapid adaptation and aggressive expansion patterns. Sarah pulled up comparative analyses that made their similarities to the Harbingers undeniable. Jake, the Council isn't just afraid that humans will become dangerous. They're afraid we'll become the next Harbingers. The station's emergency systems suddenly erupted in warning lights and alarms. Jake spun toward the monitoring stations, his military training kicking in automatically. Council ships? He asked. No, Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper as she stared at the sensor readings. Jake, these energy signatures. They're not from any Council technology. The displays showed massive objects moving through space beyond the asteroid field. Ships, if they could be called ships, that dwarfed anything in the known galaxy. Their hulls seemed to bend light around them, creating distortions that hurt to look at directly. Harbinger vessels, Sarah breathed. They're early. Jake's hands moved to their communications array. We need to warn someone. The Council, Earth, Defense Command, anyone who will listen. Who's going to believe us? Sarah asked. That humanity accidentally triggered the return of an extinct warrior species by learning too much about galactic politics. Before Jake could answer, their communication system activated on its own. The voice that emerged from the speakers wasn't human or any Council species they recognized. It spoke in perfect universal standard, but with harmonics that seemed to resonate in their bones. Humans of the vessel Persistence. We have monitored your recent discoveries with interest. You have demonstrated capabilities that warrant evaluation. Sarah and Jake exchanged terrified glances. Somehow, impossibly, the Harbingers were communicating with them directly. We are dispatching representatives to your location. Do not attempt to flee. Your species has reached a developmental threshold that requires assessment under the terms of the ancient accords. The transmission cut off, leaving them in stunned silence. In the distance, Jake could see the massive alien vessels, changing course toward their hiding place. Sarah, Jake said quietly, what exactly did those ancient accords say about species that matched Harbinger development patterns? Sarah's fingers flew over the archive interfaces, pulling up the relevant treaty sections. When she found them, her face went pale. Species demonstrating Harbinger-compatible development shall be subject to integration trials. Those who prove worthy shall be offered alliance. Those who prove unworthy shall be contained. Jake felt his stomach drop. And if we refuse the trials? Sarah's voice was barely audible. Then they implement what they call the final solution. Complete sterilization of the species and all associated worlds. Through the station's viewports, they could see the Harbinger vessels approaching. Each one was the size of a small moon, their alien hulls pulsing with energies that seemed to warp space itself around them. Humanity's first contact with galactic civilization had gone catastrophically wrong. Now their species faced a test that would determine not just their future among the stars, but their very survival. and they had less than an hour to figure out how to convince the most dangerous species in galactic history that humans deserved to live. The Harbinger vessel that docked with the abandoned mining station defied every principle of physics Jake thought he understood. It didn't so much connect with the station's airlock as phase through the hull itself, creating a seamless passage between the two vessels without any visible joining mechanism. Sarah clutched the encrypted archive cores to her chest as they waited in the station's main corridor. The air itself seemed to hum with alien energy, and every surface reflected distorted images that hurt to look at directly. "Remember," Sarah whispered, "according to the archived psychological profiles, Harbingers respect strength but despise deception. Whatever happens, we tell them the truth." Jake nodded, his hand instinctively moving toward his weapon before he caught himself. A plasma rifle would be about as useful against these beings as throwing rocks at a supernova. The Harbinger, representative that emerged from the phase portal, was both more and less alien than they'd expected. Humanoid in basic shape, but clearly evolved for survival in environments that would instantly kill most life forms. Its body seemed to be composed of living metal that flowed like liquid while maintaining solid form. Where a human face might show emotions, the Harbinger's features shifted and reconfigured based on function. Telescopic eyes for detailed observation, resonance chambers for communication, processing arrays for real-time analysis. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere, at once, vibrating through the station's hull and into their bones. "I am Designate Prime 7 of the Harbinger Collective. You are the humans who have forced acceleration of contact protocols through unauthorized access to Council archives." Sarah stepped forward, fighting every instinct that told her to run. "We are. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, xenobiologist. This is Commander Jake Morrison, military specialist. We discovered evidence of systematic oppression by the Galactic Council and felt the galaxy deserved to know the truth." The Harbinger's form shifted, additional processing arrays emerging from its torso as it analyzed their words, their biometrics, probably their genetic structure down to the molecular level. Truth, an interesting concept from a species that has barely achieved interstellar capability. The alien's attention focused on the archive cores Sarah carried. "You have accessed information beyond your species' clearance level. Information that triggers specific protocols established 10,000 years ago." Jake found his voice. "We didn't know about the protocols. We were just trying to understand why humanity was being kept isolated." "Ignorance is not absolution," Prime 7 replied. "Your species has demonstrated development patterns consistent with Harbinger's psychological profiles. Rapid technological advancement through conflict. Aggressive expansion beyond your homeworld. Most significantly, the ability to thrive in environments classified as hostile to life." The Harbinger gestured, and suddenly the space around them, filled with holographic displays showing Earth from perspectives they'd never seen. Not the peaceful blue marble of tourist images, but the violent, chaotic Deathworld the Council archives had documented. Your homeworld contains predatory species that could serve as weapons platforms on civilized worlds. Your weather systems regularly generate atmospheric disturbances equivalent to orbital bombardment. Your geological activity includes volcanic forces capable of sterilizing continents. Prime 7's form shifted again, taking on configurations that seemed designed for threat assessment. "And your species has not merely survived in these conditions, you have weaponized them." New displays materialized, showing human military history from ancient warfare to modern conflicts. But the Harbinger's analysis went deeper than any Council assessment, revealing patterns that even humans hadn't recognized. You developed agriculture by domesticating the most dangerous megafauna on your planet. You created metallurgy by harnessing geological forces that most species consider natural disasters. Your space program began as weapons research. Every major technological advancement in human history has military applications. Sarah felt a chill of recognition. "You're evaluating us for integration into your collective. The trial protocols, established in the ancient accords, provide 3 possible outcomes," Prime 7 confirmed. "Integration for species proving compatible with Harbinger methodology. Containment for species demonstrating potential but requiring guidance. elimination for species posing unacceptable risks to galactic stability. Jake's military mind immediately began calculating odds and strategies. What do we have to do to prove compatibility? The Harbinger's form underwent its most dramatic shift yet, becoming something that looked almost like a sophisticated torture device, crossed with a diagnostic scanner. You will be subjected to the Trial of Worlds, a series of tests designed to evaluate your species' capacity for survival, adaptation, and strategic thinking under conditions similar to those our species face in the Dark Cluster. Both of us? Sarah asked. Negative. You will participate as representatives of your species, but the trials are designed for individual assessment. The outcome for one does not determine the outcome for the other. Your species' fate will be determined by the aggregate performance of all tested individuals. More Harbingers materialized through the phase portal, or perhaps they had been there all along and were only now choosing to become visible. Each one seemed specialized for different forms of analysis and evaluation. Wait, Jake said, pieces of the bigger picture clicking together in his mind. How many humans are you testing? Prime 7's response chilled them both. Testing has already begun across 17 human colonies and installations. 237 individuals have been selected based on psychological profiles, indicating maximum species representation. Sarah's scientific mind reeled at the implications. You're running simultaneous trials across human space? Efficiency is survival. Your species' development has accelerated beyond acceptable parameters. The Council's containment protocols have failed. Assessment must be completed before your technological capabilities exceed manageable thresholds. The space around them began to change, walls and floors reconfiguring into something that looked like an arena crossed with a laboratory. Monitoring equipment emerged from surfaces that had appeared solid moments before. The first trial evaluates adaptive capability under hostile environmental conditions, Prime 7 announced. You will be placed in simulated environments based on conditions from the Dark Cluster. Survival requires not merely enduring these conditions, but demonstrating the ability to thrive and accomplish complex objectives while under extreme stress. Jake began removing his equipment harness, understanding that conventional tools would be useless in whatever was coming. What kind of objectives? Resource acquisition, shelter construction, defensive preparation, strategic planning under incomplete information. The same challenges our species faces in the Dark Cluster every day. Sarah realized they were no longer just fighting for their own lives, but for the future of their entire species. Somewhere, across human space, 237 people were facing similar trials, their performance determining whether humanity would be welcomed among the stars or erased from existence. There's something you should know, Sarah said, making a decision that would change everything. The Council's archives contained more than just information about species suppression. They contained strategic intelligence about your activities in the Dark Cluster. For the first time since their encounter began, Prime 7's form went completely still. Explain. Sarah activated the archive cores, displaying the Council's monitoring reports from beyond the galactic rim. They've been watching you for 10,000 years. They know about the construction projects in the Dark Cluster. They know about the new technologies you've developed, and they have contingency plans for containing you if you return. The Harbinger collective around them began shifting, configurations changing from evaluation mode to something that looked decidedly more combat-oriented. You offer this information as what? A bargaining chip for species survival? Jake stepped forward. We offer it as proof that humans understand strategic thinking. The Council tried to keep us isolated not just to prevent us from becoming dangerous, but to keep us from learning about the real power structures in the galaxy. They're afraid of us, and they're afraid of you. But we're not, Sarah added, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. We want to understand. We want to learn. And if there's a fight coming between you and the Council, we want to be on the side that values truth over oppression. Prime 7's form underwent another dramatic reconfiguration, this time taking on aspects that seemed almost impressed. Interesting. Your species offers alliance before even completing the integration trials. Our species makes decisions based on available information and ethical considerations, Jake replied. From what we've learned, the Council has been systematically oppressing galactic development for thousands of years while you've been building something beyond the rim. We'd rather stand with builders than oppressors. The Harbinger Collective exchanged communication in harmonics beyond human hearing. When Prime 7 spoke again, there was something different in its tone. The trials will proceed, but your demonstration of strategic thinking and willingness to share intelligence has modified the parameters. Instead of testing for mere survival compatibility, you will be evaluated for tactical integration. What does that mean? Sarah asked. Prime 7's form shifted one final time, taking on configurations that seemed designed for respect rather than evaluation. It means your species may have just earned the right to participate in the most important conflict in galactic history. The Council believes they have contained us for 10,000 years. They are about to learn how wrong they are. And humanity? If you prove worthy in the trials, humanity will have the opportunity to help us teach the galaxy what happens when predator species decide to stop playing by civilized rules. As the trial arena completed its configuration around them, Sarah realized that everything they thought they knew about first contact was wrong. This wasn't humanity's introduction to galactic civilization. It was their audition for a war that had been brewing for 10 millennia. The first trial environment materialized around them with shocking completeness. One moment they stood in the mining station's corridor. The next, they were separated into individual chambers that replicated conditions from the dark cluster itself. Sarah found herself in a landscape that defied description. The ground beneath her feet pulsed with bioluminescent veins that provided the only light in an atmosphere thick with toxic vapors. The gravity fluctuated wildly. One moment she felt light as a feather, the next she was pressed flat against the writhing surface. Temperature readings on her suit's emergency display showed conditions that should have killed her instantly. But the Harbinger technology keeping her alive wasn't just preserving her. It was testing her. She could feel the systems analyzing her every response, measuring how quickly she adapted to each new environmental challenge. Think like a scientist, she told herself. What would you do if you were actually stranded here? The answer came from her years of studying extremophile organisms on Earth. Life found a way to survive in the most impossible conditions by exploiting whatever resources were available. The bioluminescent veins in the ground weren't just decoration, they were an energy source. Sarah began digging into the pulsing surface with her bare hands, ignoring the way the alien material felt like living tissue. Within minutes, she had jury-rigged a basic shelter using the natural energy flows to create a stable microenvironment. Meanwhile, Jake faced his own nightmare scenario in an adjacent chamber. His environment simulated a battlefield from the predecessor, war. A landscape of twisted metal and impossible geometries where the rules of physics seemed more like suggestions. Gravity pulled in 3 directions at once. Time moved at different rates in different locations. And somewhere in the chaos, he had to locate and secure strategic objectives that kept shifting position. Jake's military training had prepared him for asymmetric warfare, but nothing had prepared him for combat where the battlefield itself was an active opponent. He watched his chronometer display readings that made no sense, felt his inner ear struggle with gravitational fields that changed by the second. Don't fight the environment, he realized. Use it. Instead of trying to move in straight lines, Jake began timing his movements to the gravitational fluctuations, letting the chaotic forces carry him toward his objectives. When time dilation fields slowed his progress, he used the extra, subjective time to plan his next moves. What should have been an impossible mission became a complex puzzle that responded to creative thinking. Prime 7 monitored both trials simultaneously, its processing arrays analyzing thousands of data, points per second. The human's performance was unexpected. Most species faced with dark cluster conditions focused on survival, trying to minimize their exposure to hostile forces. The humans were doing something entirely different. They were studying the hostile forces and figuring out how to weaponize them. In her trial chamber, Sarah had moved beyond basic shelter construction, She was using the bioluminescent energy flows to create primitive but effective tools. More importantly, she was documenting everything, building a database of exploitable resources that could be used by future human explorers. Jake had completed his tactical objectives, but instead of simply securing the designated positions, he was analyzing the battlefield's anomalous properties. His military mind was already developing strategies for using dark cluster conditions as force multipliers in combat situations. Fascinating, Prime 7 murmured to its collective. They demonstrate the same adaptive aggression that characterized early Harbinger development. But the trials were far from over. The second phase materialized around the humans with the sudden intensity of a lightning strike. Sarah's environment transformed into a scenario that tested not survival, but leadership under impossible conditions. She found herself in command of a mixed group of alien life forms, holographic simulations but sophisticated enough to have individual personalities and motivations. Her mission: lead them through a hostile environment to achieve a complex objective, despite the fact that none of them spoke the same language or shared compatible sensory systems. The scenario was designed to evaluate species-level leadership potential. Most tested individuals tried to impose familiar command structures on unfamiliar subordinates. The few who succeeded usually did so through brute force or threat dominance. Sarah took a completely different approach. Within the first hour, she had abandoned any attempt at direct command. Instead, she began studying each alien's behavioral patterns, identifying their individual strengths and motivations. She couldn't speak their languages, but she could observe their reactions to different environmental stimuli. The breakthrough came when she realized that effective leadership in an impossible situation wasn't about giving orders. It was about creating conditions where each individual could contribute their unique capabilities toward a common goal. Instead of trying to control her diverse team, Sarah began orchestrating them like a conductor leading a symphony. Each alien had evolved different problem-solving approaches based on their species' environmental pressures. By creating scenarios where those different approaches complemented each other, she turned a group of incompatible individuals into an effective, problem-solving collective. Jake's second trial tested strategic thinking under information warfare conditions. He found himself in a command center facing multiple tactical scenarios simultaneously, but every piece of information he received was potentially compromised. Intelligence reports that might be true, false, or partially accurate. Sensor data, that could be legitimate readings or sophisticated deceptions. Communications from allied forces that might actually be enemy infiltrators. The trial was designed to evaluate decision-making capability when traditional military intelligence methods were unreliable. Most species faced with such conditions became paralyzed by uncertainty or made decisions based on incomplete information. Jake approached the problem like a human persistence hunter. Instead of trying to determine which information was accurate, he began tracking patterns in the deception itself. Lies required internal consistency to be believable. By analyzing the structure of the false information, he could identify the underlying truths that the deceptions were designed to conceal. Within hours, Jake had not only completed his assigned tactical objectives, but had reverse-engineered the entire enemy deception campaign. More importantly, he had developed counter-deception strategies that turned the enemy's information warfare capabilities against them. Prime 7's collective monitoring systems were registering readings they had never seen before in 10,000 years of conducting integration trials. They are not solving the trials, one of the collective observed. They are redefining them. Explain. The trials are designed to test survival and adaptation within established parameters. The humans are changing the parameters themselves. They are demonstrating capabilities that exceed the baseline requirements for integration. Prime 7 processed this analysis while monitoring the final trial phase that was materializing around both humans. The third trial was the most crucial and the most dangerous. It tested the one capability that distinguished truly compatible species from merely capable ones: the ability to thrive in conditions of permanent conflict. The environment that surrounded Sarah and Jake was a perfect simulation of life in the Yaur dark cluster, where the Harbinger Collective had spent 10 millennia preparing for their return to the galaxy. It was a realm where peace was impossible, where survival required constant adaptation to new threats, where technological advancement happened through continuous warfare against hostile forces. Most species broke under such conditions. Even those who survived the physical challenges usually suffered psychological collapse when faced with the reality that conflict was not a temporary state to be endured, but a permanent condition to be embraced. Sarah found herself in a research facility under constant attack by forces that adapted to her defenses in real time. Every solution she developed was immediately countered by new threats. Every technological advancement was met by escalating dangers. The only way to survive was to innovate faster than the hostile environment could adapt. For most species, this would have been nightmare. For Sarah, it was paradise. She had spent her career studying life forms that thrived in impossible conditions. Now she was living that research. Instead of being overwhelmed by the constant pressure, she found herself energized by it. Each new threat was a puzzle to solve. Each adaptation a chance to learn something new about the fundamental nature of survival itself. Jake's version of the trial was even more intense. He commanded forces in a conflict that never ended against opponents who learned from every engagement. Traditional military doctrine was useless. By the time you developed tactics to counter an enemy strategy, they had already moved on to something completely different. The trial demanded the kind of thinking that humans had developed through millions of years of persistence hunting and tribal warfare. Not the ability to win decisive battles, but the ability to maintain pressure over extended periods, while continuously adapting to changing conditions. Jake didn't just survive the endless conflict, he thrived in it. His human persistence hunter instincts, refined through military training, proved perfectly suited to warfare conditions where victory came not through overwhelming force, but through outlasting opponents who couldn't adapt as quickly as circumstances changed. As the trials concluded, Prime 7 and the Harbinger Collective faced a situation they had never encountered before. Not only had the humans passed every trial, they had exceeded performance parameters that the Collective had considered theoretical maximums. Analysis complete, Prime 7 announced to Sarah and Jake, as the trial environments dissolved around them. Your species demonstrates compatibility with Harbinger operational parameters at levels we have not observed since our own evolution. Sarah felt exhausted, but exhilarated. What does that mean for humanity? It means, Prime 7 replied, it's form shifting into configurations that seemed designed to convey respect, that your species is invited to participate in the next phase of galactic evolution. Jake realized they were no longer talking about integration or containment. What next phase? Prime 7's response changed everything they thought they knew about the future of galactic civilization. The Council believes they have maintained peace through suppression and control. For 10,000 years, they have prevented species from reaching their full potential. The time has come to demonstrate what the galaxy could become if its inhabitants were allowed to evolve without artificial constraints. You're going to war with the Council, Sarah breathed. We are going to liberate the galaxy from the Council, and your species, having proven its capability to survive and thrive under impossible conditions, is invited to help us show every suppressed civilization what they could become if they were allowed to reach their true potential. As the implications sank in, Sarah and Jake realized that their discovery of the truth about Earth's classification was just the beginning. Humanity wasn't just joining galactic civilization, they were about to help reshape it entirely. But first, they had to survive what was coming. Because somewhere in Council space, alarms were sounding as sensors detected the return of the most dangerous species in galactic history, and this time, they weren't alone. Epilogue. The dawn of War 6, months after the Harbinger trials. The galaxy had learned to fear the dark spaces between stars. Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the HSV Persistence Hunter, humanity's first true warship built with Harbinger technology. Through the viewports, she could see the massive construction yards that humanity had established in the Dark Cluster, where human engineering combined with Harbinger knowledge was producing vessels that redefined the possibilities of spacefaring, warfare, The ship's name reflected humanity's new role in galactic affairs. No longer the isolated species from a forbidden Deathworld, humans had become the galaxy's premier specialists in persistence warfare, the kind of extended adaptive conflict that broke civilized species, but only made humans stronger. Jake Morrison's voice crackled over the communication system from his position aboard the flagship, Deathworld Rising. Sarah, we're receiving surrender broadcasts from the Centauri Council fleet. That's the Third Sector Defense Force to stand down without engaging. Sarah smiled grimly. The war was proceeding exactly as the Harbinger strategists had predicted. Council forces designed for conflicts between civilized species following established rules of engagement were completely unprepared for the reality of warfare against predator species that had evolved without such constraints. Any word from the Liberation fleets? 17 more systems have declared independence from Council authority. The Zephyrian colonies are requesting human military advisors to help establish planetary defense forces. And the Arcturus Federation wants to negotiate mutual defense agreements. It was happening faster than anyone had anticipated. As news of humanity's alliance with the Harbingers spread across the galaxy, suppressed species were rising up against Council authority. Not through violent revolution, but through the simple act of refusing to accept artificial limitations on their development. The Council's response had been predictable. Enforcement fleets dispatched to bring rebellious systems back into compliance. But enforcement required overwhelming technological superiority, and that superiority was evaporating as humans shared Earth-based survival technologies with newly liberated worlds. Dr. Chen, the ship's communication officer, called out, "We're receiving a priority transmission from Harbinger Command." Prime 7's familiar harmonics filled the bridge. Dr. Chen, Commander Morrison, the final phase of galactic liberation is ready to commence. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. The final phase meant a direct assault on the Council's core systems, the ancient worlds where galactic civilization had first developed under Harbinger guidance 10,000 years ago. "What's our role?" Jake asked from his flagship. "Human forces will lead the liberation of Earth," Prime 7 replied. "The Council has maintained a monitoring station in your solar system for 4 centuries. Its destruction will serve as both a strategic objective and a symbolic declaration that the age of suppression has ended." Sarah's breath caught. Earth. After everything they'd learned about humanity's place in the galaxy, they were finally going home. "There's more," Prime 7 continued. "Intelligence gathered from liberated Council facilities indicates that Earth was not the only Deathworld under surveillance. The Council has been monitoring 17 other extreme environment worlds, waiting for their inhabitants to develop spaceflight capabilities." Jake's voice carried new excitement. "Other Deathworld species?" "Confirmed. Species that evolved under conditions ranging from tidally locked planets with extreme temperature gradients to worlds orbiting unstable stars with constant radiation bombardment. The Council's classification system identified them as potential Harbinger analogs and implemented preemptive containment protocols." Sarah realized the full scope of what they were liberating. "How many species have been suppressed?" Conservative estimates suggest over 3,000 civilizations have had their development artificially constrained by Council policies. Many more have been eliminated entirely when they showed excessive potential for independent advancement. The numbers were staggering. For 10,000 years, the galaxy had been operating at a fraction of its true potential, held back by a system designed to prevent any species from becoming too capable, too independent, too dangerous. "The Liberation fleets are ready," Prime 7 announced. "Human forces will spearhead the assault on Sol system while Harbinger collectives engage Council strongholds throughout the core worlds. Newly liberated species will provide support and begin establishing the framework for post-Council galactic governance." As the massive fleet began moving toward the galactic rim, Sarah reflected on how completely their understanding of the universe had changed. What had started as a simple investigation into humanity's isolation had become the catalyst for the most significant transformation in galactic history. "Jake," she said over the communication link, "do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't broken into those archives?" Jake's laughter carried across the void between their ships. The same thing that would have happened if our ancestors had decided to stay in the trees instead of learning to hunt on the African savanna. Someone else would have done it eventually. The persistent predator advantage? Exactly. Earth didn't just produce one species capable of thriving under impossible conditions. It produced the entire ecosystem of them. Humans were just the first to develop interstellar capability. Through her viewport, Sarah could see the sleek forms of ships from dozens of liberated worlds joining the fleet. Each species brought their own unique capabilities, their own solutions to the challenges of survival and advancement. But at the heart of the Liberation Fleet were the vessels that combined human persistence hunter instincts with harbinger technology. Ships designed not just to win battles, but to outlast any opponent in extended conflicts where adaptation mattered more than raw firepower. Dr. Chen, the navigation officer, reported, "We're approaching the Sol system perimeter. Council monitoring stations are going active." Sarah moved to the tactical displays, watching as the ancient surveillance network that had kept humanity isolated for 4 centuries finally revealed itself. Massive stations hidden in asteroid fields and Oort cloud objects, equipped with weapons, systems capable of sterilizing entire planets. Jake, are you seeing this? I see it, Sarah. Some of these installations have been here since before humans developed agriculture. They've been watching us, studying us, preparing for this moment since we first learned to make fire. Then they know what's coming. Jake's voice carried the satisfaction of a hunter who had finally cornered dangerous prey. They know. And they're about to learn why you never corner something that evolved on a Deathworld. As the human Harbinger fleet engaged the Council's ancient defenses around Earth, signals were already broadcasting across the galaxy. Messages of liberation, carrying technological gifts and strategic intelligence to every suppressed world within 1,000 light-years of Sol. The age of artificial constraints was ending. The galaxy was about to discover what its inhabitants could accomplish when they were finally allowed to reach their true potential. And at the center of it all, the children of Earth were coming home, bringing with them the most dangerous gift any species could offer, the knowledge that survival was possible under any conditions as long as you were willing to adapt, persist, and never accept defeat. The Council had spent 4 centuries studying humanity, trying to understand what made Deathworld species so dangerous they were about to get a practical demonstration. The end.